Can can I can I come in? Can I come in for just a moment? Um, there's a lot of growth on the channel right now. This is where for people who've been subscribers for a while, they're like, "Oh, Shannon's gonna explain the channel." Crap. No. I'm not gonna go into that. I used to do explanations. This morning I did something fun. I created a playlist of Brad Marchand videos that date back to 2016. I think is the earliest one on that playlist. Because I have been more than willing to call out Brad Marchand when he does something stupid. It dates all the way back to a slew foot on Cronwall that he wasn't suspended for. Still don't understand that one. And on this channel I try to promote everything. The one thing that's different, and again this is for newer subscribers, I admit to you, I cheer for Vancouver, Boston, and Dallas. Those are my three favorite teams in that order. And there's videos on the channel that explain why and how. How in the world could you be a fan of those three teams? Well, Minnesota 1981, Vancouver same year. I really picked up my Vancouver fandom during the 82 Stanley Cup final run, and then Boston after the Cam Neely trade. I was a huge Boston fan, which partly helped because of a rivalry I had with my father, who was a huge Montreal fan. So that's the explanation in a nutshell for all of that. Last night's game got pretty ugly. I'm talking about the Toronto-Boston game. I felt that both teams, I thought there were questionable things that happened on both sides, and I didn't want to get into who did what to, because honestly, we can play that game for weeks, and a Boston fan and a Toronto fan could sit down and watch that game and see two completely different games. The trick for me is that as a Boston fan, I have to watch it as a fan of hockey and say, okay, that should probably be a suspension. That probably shouldn't. And then when I do a review after, I have to say, all right, I could say Kadri's going to get suspended for that, but that's going to make a lot of people angry. So I'm just going to come out and say, I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe. Yeah. And I kind of have to hedge a little bit because, again, if I come out and say that, then there's going to be people who come in and say, oh, you should be calling for a DeBrusk suspension. When DeBrusk stuff was just agitating because the Maple Leafs don't have any pushback. And then, Sean Avery comes out with a video and he ends it with "Go Leafs," which to me is a bad way to end it. If you're trying to be unbiased, and I don't think Sean Avery would even try to argue he's being unbiased. I think Avery would admit, oh yeah, no, I'm biased as hell. I'm going for the Leafs. But he comes out and he says, well, DeBrusk hits Marleau, a 20-year veteran, which is really disrespectful. And all I think is the way that you throw your arms up in front of Marty Brodeur out of complete and total respect for his amazing accomplishments as a goaltender. I'm sure he was like, hey, Marty, I love all your work. You've been in the league for about 20 years. You're awesome. Can I have your autograph after the game? And never referred to his weight as a negative either, right? Anyways, so when Avery talks, I kind of go, it's entertaining, but yeah. And then Avery comes out and says Matthews should square off against DeBrusk in game 1 or game 3. Why? And that's the problem, is that the Leafs at the deadline decided to go with skill. Kyle Dubas came out and said, we're going to win, we're going to lose with skill. It's all skill. It's all about skill. This is a skill team. We're not a physical team. I'm not going to go out and get Wayne Simmons. I'm not going to go out and get Adam McQuaid. I'm not going to get that grit, that sandpaper. And I think that's hurting them. I absolutely do. Because for Boston, who are not a hugely physical team, they really aren't. If Toronto was against the Islanders, I think they'd be in this same situation. Because the Islanders, can play a really good defensive, gritty game. And personally, as a hockey fan, watching this, it's interesting in that Toronto gets a split in Boston, so they get home ice back. They can win 3 games at home and not have to win in Boston again. They can win it in 6. But the whole conversation right now is about last night, which means Boston was very successful. And, I've seen all of the controversy coming out of the game and all of the very upset fans, and I get it. I get it. And I know from the perspective as a Canucks fan, I've been the guy who goes to work And after the Canucks lose a big playoff game, everybody will be all complaining about this hit and that hit. And I'm usually a guy saying, well, yeah, but that wasn't a penalty. Or, well, yeah, the Sedins got run over, but that was just that was a 2-minute penalty. They're not going to suspend them for that. And I found myself very often arguing against the really fanatical fans that are very protective of the players on the team and going, well, yeah, that looked bad, but it's not a suspension. That looked bad. Probably should have called a penalty. They didn't. And if we're going to get into missed calls, yeah. And the funny thing is, people keep talking about how, the refereeing has been terrible. This is playoff refereeing. I have been saying for years, one of the biggest problems the National Hockey League has, if not the biggest problem, is that what's a penalty in October is not a penalty in April. That is one of the biggest problems the National Hockey League has, is that they tell referees to put their whistles away, or the referees on their own volition say, well, it's a playoff game, I'm going to let that go. It happens in every series. It has happened for decades. And it is absolutely ridiculous. It makes it so that the sport is very difficult to call as an analyst at all. I can't imagine being a guy down between the benches and going, wow, that's a penalty. Well, that's a penalty. That's a penalty. Huh, that's interesting. They're not calling anything. And it's got to be hard to remain unbiased and not just come out and, this is ridiculous. And it's happening in every series. This is not just something that's going on with Boston Toronto. It happens in every series. It happens all the time. And then you'll get that one referee that is still trying to make calls like in October, and that game will stand out because you'll have like 10 power plays between those two teams, and you'll have like 4 in the next game that comes on, and you're like, wow, this is so different. And the referee that's going to get called by the NHL is probably going to be the one that called 10 penalties, where the NHL is going to be like, just let him play. Just let him go out and play. And it is a hockey scenario that happens every year, and it affects different teams differently. The reason that it's going to have an adverse effect on the Leafs is because they're soft. They're a soft team. When they let go of Matt Martin and Leo Komarov, I totally understood why there were Leaf fans that said, well, that's not a huge loss, but it was, because now it means that Nazem Kadri is your physical forward. Kadri is the guy. So, for the Bruins to have kind of keyed on him, and it worked. He lost his cool. Now, going into the next game right now, there is some doubt as to whether or not DeBrusk, Krug, Clifton will play. They're all listed as injured. And Marcus Johansson is not traveling with the team. He's ill. I assume it's the flu that's been traveling around the NHL so horribly right now. But it's a very, very interesting time of year. It always is. And, I do my best to present it as evenly as possible. But, if I want to get into missed calls in every single game, those reviews are going to be a heck of a lot longer. And then it turns into just, the cavalcade of comments that are just not productive. It's part of that time of year. It's interesting because we have this discussion every year. And again, I think what's a penalty in October should be a penalty in April, and it should be a penalty in June. And come Stanley Cup Finals, nothing's called. It's a free-for-all out there, and I find it absolutely insane. I think it's crazy. But there are people that really enjoy that. People say, yep, no, it's good playoff hockey. And then there are those like me that say, why was that not a penalty? Why that slash on the hands that's a penalty in October, why isn't it a penalty now? And why is it a penalty for one referee and not a penalty for the other? And the one that still thinks it's a penalty is probably going to be the one that the league says, well, you're not working the next round. It's an interesting time of year. But there you go. There's my opinion on it, my take on it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And tomorrow, NHL Department of Player Safety is supposed to come down with a decision on what to do about Nazem Kadri. And depending on who you talk to, it'll be a game, it'll be 5, it'll be 10, it'll be 20, it'll be life. I don't know. But it's ridiculous at this time of year because fans get really, really passionate about it. But remember, if you're a Leafs fan, you left Boston with a 1-1 split, and you're going home for the next 2. If they assert themselves at home in games 3 and 4, none of it's going to matter. The Bruins are the ones getting hurt, and the Leafs would be the ones moving on to the next round. So Babcock's got the right mindset right now that he's just going, all right, well, if I'm not going to have Kadri, this is what I'm going to do with the lineup. He's not going to worry about it. Good attitude. We'll see how far things go for them. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, and I will talk to you again soon.